Welcome to my Sacred Revenge channel, where betrayal isn't just exposed, it's answered.
His response, delivered in a voice as flat and distant as a forgotten echo, was, "It's Amelia's birthday. Can we talk tomorrow?" That was the precise, gut-wrenching moment I realized I hadn't just lost a husband. I had lost a son, too. He never appeared at the funeral, a stark, painful absence that screamed louder than any eulogy. But 3 weeks later, a letter from my lawyer arrived in his mailbox. He opened it, and I am told he froze. I had set something in motion, a consequence he would never forget. And I had done it all in profound, unwavering silence. Before I begin telling you my story, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if you'd like to share your own story, feel free to write to us. Arthur died right there at our kitchen table, mid-sentence, halfway through, a teasing joke about how I'd once again purchased the wrong kind of coffee creamer. If I dropped dead from this powdered nonsense, he had chuckled. Lightly tapping his spoon against the side of his mug, you'll finally know real guilt. Then his hand twitched. The spoon slipped from his grasp. His eyes widened, suddenly vacant, as if he had utterly forgotten how to breathe. I dropped the butter knife I was using and instinctively ran to him, screaming his name, but he was already gone. His body went limp before I could even dial 911. Before my knees hit the cold tile floor, before I could even ask him if this was another one of his infamous, dark-humored jokes. It wasn't. The emergency operator's voice in my ear remained unnervingly calm, even as my entire world split open with a sickening crack, kept whispering his name, a desperate, futile mantra, as they guided me through chest compressions. But a chilling certainty had already settled deep within me. I knew from the way his head slumped against his shoulder, from how impossibly cold his fingers felt when I tried to interlace mine with his. When the paramedics finally arrived, I stepped aside, numb and disoriented, hearing fragments of words, like massive, unrecoverable NDNR, and I simply nodded. A silent, hollow acceptance. The house, our sanctuary for so many years, suddenly felt too loud and too quiet all at once. A cacophony of absence. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring blankly at the floor, seeing nothing. After they had covered him, after they had gently told me there was truly nothing more they could do, I picked up my phone. I called Victor, my only son. It rang 5 agonizing times. When he finally answered, my entire body was shaking, but I managed to choke out the words, "Victor, it's Dad. He just collapsed. He's dead." There was a long, unsettling pause, an eternity of silence on the line. Then his voice, flat, utterly distracted, said, "Oh, Mom, today's Amelia's birthday. Can I call you later?" At first, I didn't even comprehend the words. I thought perhaps the shock had caused me to hallucinate them, to conjure such a cruel response from the depths of my grief. But then he added, his tone tinged with impatience, "She's got this whole brunch planned, and we've got people over." I said nothing. Not a scream, not a sob, not even a ragged breath. Just a profound, devastating silence. A hand, as if acting on some primal instinct, slowly lowered the phone. I had hung up on my own son, unable to bear hearing anything else that would splinter my heart further. The room around me began to hum, a low, oppressive drone, like my ears were filling with immense pressure. I looked over at Arthur's favorite armchair, the one he always occupied for breakfast. For late-night crossword puzzles, the one he was still slumped in. I just sat beside him for what felt like an hour, holding his hand, foolishly, hoping, irrationally believing that my touch alone could somehow coax him back to life. At some point, the coroner arrived. They asked if I wanted a moment alone with him. I didn't. What was the point? The only moment that truly mattered, the one I desperately needed, was already irrevocably gone. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and simply lay down on our bed without changing the sheets, wanting to cling to any lingering scent of him. Arthur's phone rested on the nightstand. Picked it up, hoping, God, hoping there would be something, some last message, some final connection. And there was. A missed call log from last night. 10:42 p.m., one missed call to Victor. No voicemail left, no answer. He had tried. Arthur had tried to talk to him last night. Maybe he knew something was wrong, eh? Maybe he felt it, a premonition. And our son, our only son, had ignored it. I held the phone to my chest and felt the crushing weight of everything we had built together. 42 years of marriage, a house brimming with cherished memories. A man who had worked tirelessly every single day to ensure his family never wanted for anything. And the silence from Victor, his deafening absence, rang louder than any eulogy ever could. The day of Arthur's funeral felt like stepping into a bizarre, distorted parallel universe where I could see everyone's lips moving, hear the faint murmurs of sympathetic voices, but could truly hear nothing except the screaming, unbearable silence of Victor's absence. I stood by the casket, gripping the edges of the podium to keep my balance, while people I hadn't seen in years approached me, murmuring platitudes like, "He was such a good man. We're so terribly sorry." And all I could think about, with a searing, desperate ache, was how my son, my only child, was not there, not in the pews, not standing steadfastly beside me, not even lingering in the damned parking lot, when I had called the night before the funeral to confirm the time. Amelia had answered. She informed me with an unsettlingly casual tone that Victor was still thinking about it because they had already booked a weekend getaway. And the cancellation fees were steep this close to the date. I remember staring at the phone, blinking slowly as she rambled on about how Amelia's birthday was important, too, and that she was merely trying to keep things light for the sake of her own mental health. I didn't even dignify her with a response. I just hung up. I refused to beg for attendance at a funeral, especially not for Arthur's. Not when he was the man who had stayed up all night with a colicky Victor, who spent countless weekends building intricate Lego cities, and who had patiently taught him how to balance a checkbook by the tender age of 12. And certainly not when Arthur had called Victor the night before he died, and that call had gone unanswered, unreturned. People noticed. Of course they did. The whispers started even before the service officially began. Where's Victor? Did he miss his flight? Is Amelia okay? As if they were the ones who deserved our concern, who needed comfort. Even Arthur's college friend, Samuel, leaned over and whispered, "I thought your boy would be front and center today." And I just nodded a fragile gesture, as if it wasn't utterly breaking me in half. But the moment that truly shattered the last vestiges of my composure came after the service. When one of Arthur's co-workers, Mr. Davies, approached me by the coffee urn in the fellowship hall. "I don't mean to pry," he began, his voice hesitant. "But Arthur mentioned something rather odd in passing last month about helping Victor out financially. He seemed quite stressed about it." That stopped me. Cold. Arthur never told me anything like that. He had no secrets, or so I thought. I didn't press Mr. Davies to elaborate. I simply offered a strained smile, thanked him for coming, and excused myself to the restroom, where I sat on the toilet seat lid and stared at the cracked tiles on the floor until someone knocked. Asking if everything was okay? Everything was. Not okay. My son had missed his father's funeral for a birthday brunch and a weekend getaway. And now I was hearing unsettling hints of financial stress and hidden secrets. When I arrived home that night, the silence in the house was an unbearable, suffocating weight. I poured myself a glass of wine, stared at Arthur's empty armchair, and fought back the overwhelming tide of cold, desolate loneliness. Then I opened my phone and saw a photo Amelia had posted on her social media. It showed her in a vibrant fuchsia dress, holding a mimosa, with the caption, "Best birthday ever. Love, my hubby." The photo had been posted during the funeral, during the eulogy. I stared at the screen until the image blurred through unshed tears, and my hands began to tremble uncontrollably. That night, sleep was an impossible luxury. I lay in our bed, reaching instinctively for the comforting weight of Arthur's hand beside me, and came up empty. Around 3 in the morning, I finally got up, opened Arthur's desk drawer, and began pulling out paperwork. Bank statements, insurance records, old receipts, anything that might explain what Mr. Davies had hinted at. 'Cause now it wasn't just grief. Now there was something else, something colder, a gnawing suspicion that perhaps I didn't know the full story of my own family. And the one person who could have answered every single question, Arthur, was gone. The next morning, I woke with a new mission, a purpose born not of mere curiosity, but of something sharper, something closer to a righteous rage disguised as grief. I went directly to Arthur's filing cabinet, the one he always kept locked, but for which he had often reminded me I possessed the spare key. It was taped, rather quaintly, to the back of our wedding photo in the closetta, small gesture of trust that now felt like a test. A final painful revelation. I opened the drawer and began sifting through folders, thick with years of meticulously organized tax returns, retirement plans, and bank statements, all arranged by month and year, as if compiled by a man who never expected to die mid-sentence. It didn't take long to find it, a slim blue folder starkly labeled Victor Transfers. I sat down, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and flipped through a devastating timeline of quiet betrayal. Regular wire transfers from Arthur's personal account to Victor's. $2,000 here, $3,500 there, and one entry that made my hands go instantly cold. $12,000 labeled Urgent Amelia Medical. I stared at the numbers, willing them to change as if blinking hard enough could erase their existence. There were 15 such transfers in the past 18 months alone. I had no idea. Arthur never told me. We didn't keep secrets. We had agreed on that sacred principle the day we merged our bank accounts and joyfully picked out a crib together for our son. I kept reading, my eyes scanning each page, searching desperately for a clue, something, anything, to make sense of this hidden ledger. That's when I found it, a letter folded and tucked carefully between the last two statements. It was handwritten on yellow legal pad paper, the kind Arthur always kept on his desk, and it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Victor. Victor, it began, this is the second time you've told your mother one thing and done another. I've kept quiet because I desperately wanted to believe you were being honest. But if you lie about Amelia's expenses again, or if I find out you've used this money for anything other than what you explicitly stated, I'll have no choice but to cut you off completely. I love you, but I will not let you take advantage of your mother's trust. It wasn't signed, but I knew Arthur's handwriting as intimately as I knew the creases on his palm. He never sent it. It was dated 2 weeks before he died. I sat there, staring at the damning words, my hand trembling so violently that the edges of the paper crinkled in my grip. My mind kept returning to the unsettling flatness of Victor's voice over the phone after I had told him his father died. Calm, inconvenienced as if I were asking him to cancel a trivial dentist appointment. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't cry. I just sat there, trapped in the suffocating realization that the man I loved, my steadfast partner, had spent the last months of his life quietly battling our son's deceit, shielding me from the painful fallout. And now Victor, who couldn't be bothered to show up to his own father's funeral, had brazenly accepted tens of thousands of dollars while pretending everything was perfectly fine. I carefully put the folder back in the drawer, locked it, and tucked the key back behind the wedding photo where it belonged. Not out of respect for the secret, but because I needed time to think, to truly process the magnitude of this revelation. Not just about the money or the lies, but about what it all profoundly meant about what kind of man my son had truly become, and whether I possessed the strength, the moral fortitude, to do what Arthur had clearly been unable to finish. I sat down at the kitchen table, the very same spot where Arthur had died 5 days ago, and stared at the same coffee mug he'd held, still unwashed in the sink, a silent testament to his abrupt departure. I didn't yet know my next move. But one thing was crystal clear. I was done pretending everything was fine. He showed up unannounced on a Wednesday, 5 days after the funeral, as if that belated appearance could somehow make it acceptable. As if grief had a convenient expiration date and his delayed presence could still count for something meaningful. But when I opened the door and saw Victor standing there, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, that hollow, uncomfortable look in his eyes, I didn't feel relief. I felt a cold, calculated awareness, like he had come not out of genuine sorrow, but from a sense of obligation or worse, damage control. Behind him, Amelia sat in their car, idling in the driveway, as if poised for an immediate escape the second things became uncomfortable. This small detail told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. I stepped aside without a word, leading him into the living room, where Arthur's armchair still sat untouched. A silent monument to everything Victor had so casually ignored. I offered him coffee out of habit, but he declined, fidgeting on the edge of the couch as if he were waiting for a commercial break. An opportune moment to escape this uncomfortable tableau. When he finally spoke, it was with a strained, almost practiced politeness. "Amelia thinks I should have come sooner, and she's probably right." And I wanted to laugh, a bitter, hollow sound, because of course she was the one who had prompted him. Of course it required her permission, her strategic input, not love, not guilt, not a shred of conscience. Just her saying, "Go fix it," as if his father's death and my subsequent grief were nothing more than a minor public relations issue. I nodded slowly and sat across from him, my phone already discreetly recording from the pocket of my cardigan. I didn't trust myself to remember every lie, every deflection. And I certainly didn't trust him not to gaslight me about this moment later, especially not after what I'd discovered in Arthur's meticulously kept files. I asked, watching his face intently for the telltale flinch. It came a slight twitch in his jaw, almost imperceptible, followed by a defensive shrug. I had my phone on silent. "We were out for dinner," he began, then caught himself mid-sentence, as if realizing how utterly ridiculous his excuse sounded. And I just let the heavy silence stretch until it became so uncomfortable that he began to desperately fill it with more half-formed, flimsy excuses. I meant to call him back. I did, but I didn't know it was serious. He never said anything about being sick. You didn't either. I kept my expression neutral, betraying nothing of how deeply that last line cut. How quickly he tried to shift the blame onto me, as if it were my fault he hadn't shown up, as if Arthur's sudden death was merely a scheduling error for which we all shared equal responsibility. "He wasn't sick, Victor," I stated flatly, my voice devoid of emotion. "He had a heart attack at the breakfast table 5 minutes after joking about the coffee creamer." He looked away, rubbing his forehead as if this conversation was an unbearable burden, as if I was making things worse by refusing to smooth over the harsh edges of reality. Then I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering, and said it plainly, unequivocally. "I found the transfers." His entire body stiffened, as if I had dropped a lit match onto a pool of gasoline. "What transfers?" I asked. Too quickly, too loudly, his voice laced with feigned confusion. I didn't bother to ease him into the truth. "The ones from Dad's account to yours, Amelia's medical bills, your vacation, the rent shortfall. Don't you dare lie to me, Victor. Not now." And he had the sheer audacity to look offended. "Were loans, Mom. We were going through a rough patch. Dad offered." And that's when I handed him the folded yellow letter, the one Arthur had written but never sent. The one where he explicitly told Victor that if he lied again, the money would stop. He read it in silence, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting, then folded it back up with an unsettling composure, as if it weren't the most damning piece of evidence exposing the man he had become. "He didn't mean that," Victor muttered, his voice barely a whisper. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't talking to my son anymore. Not the boy who used to fall asleep on Arthur's chest during Sunday football games. Not the eager teenager who helped build his father's shed in the backyard with such enthusiasm. Instead, I was facing a man who had mastered the art of rationalizing his own betrayal, who had become a stranger. And I felt nothing but a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't someone who had made a single regrettable mistake. This was someone who had made a deliberate choice repeatedly to prioritize his own comfort and convenience over the sacred bonds of our family. And now he was here, not out of genuine remorse, but because Amelia had undoubtedly told him to salvage what little was left. I stood up, walked to the front door, and simply said, "I'll let you know if I need anything further from you." He looked like he wanted to protest, to say something, anything. But Amelia honked impatiently from the driveway, and he merely nodded, a silent, pathetic surrender. He walked out without a hug, without a single question about how I was truly holding up, and I watched him get into the car. Watched Amelia glance at the house with that smug smirk she probably didn't even realize she wore when she thought she had won something. And I thought, a quiet, steel-edged promise to myself, you have no idea what's coming. The morning after Victor's visit, I woke with a profound calmness that almost frightened me, the kind that arises not from peace, but from an unshakable decision. I didn't even bother to make coffee before calling Mr. Harrison, our longtime attorney, the man who had handled Arthur's business filings for decades and never failed to send us a birthday card. When I told him I needed to revise my will immediately, he didn't ask questions, just scheduled me for the very next day. I gathered everything: the bank statements, the incriminating folder of Victor's transfers, Arthur's unsent letter, and the audio file of Victor's pathetic, half-hearted confession from the day before. Then I added one final crucial item: a handwritten letter addressed to Chloe, our granddaughter, to be opened precisely on her 18th birthday. Because whatever else unfolded in this fractured family, that little girl deserved to know the unvarnished truth. Not the sanitized version her mother would spin, or the convenient silence Victor would attempt to pass off as dignity. When I walked into Mr. Harrison's office, he took one look at my face and, with a knowing sigh, said, "I assume this is about more than mere estate planning." I nodded, handed him the stack of damning documents, and said, "Everything goes into a trust. Every account, every asset, the house, the annuity, Arthur's stocks, but not for Victor, not for Amelia, not a single penny." He didn't blink. He simply opened a fresh legal pad and began writing, meticulously taking notes. We structured the trust so that Chloe would inherit everything, but not until she turned 25, with early access granted only for legitimate educational expenses and housing. No luxury cars, no guilt-driven teenage bribes. And I asked Mr. Harrison to include a specific clause: if Victor or Amelia ever attempted to challenge the will, Chloe would immediately gain full control of the entire inheritance, and they would forfeit all rights, including visitation during the trust's active years. I knew it sounded harsh, but when a parent chooses a brunch over a funeral, and a spouse chooses callous manipulation over genuine mourning, you stop worrying about diplomacy and start fiercely protecting the only remaining piece of your husband still left on this earth. He also included a transcript of Victor's recent visit, explicitly confirming the financial deception, the emotional abandonment, and the outright abuse of trust. Then he looked at me, his gaze steady. "This is solid, Coraline," he said, using my rarely used first name. "No loopholes, no weak points. But it's going to hit him hard." And I replied, my voice firm, "That's precisely the point, Alan. It's supposed to." The final draft was notarized and officially filed within the hour. I walked out feeling not like I had won a battle, but like I had reclaimed something far more profound: a boundary. A clear line in the sand that Arthur had never quite been able to draw himself. And it wasn't revenge. It was reality. If my son wanted to treat his parents like endlessly dispensing ATM machines, then he would discover just how long that machine had been quietly watching, meticulously documenting, waiting for the exact moment to irrevocably cut the cord. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a single glass of wine and reread the letter I had poured my heart into for Chloe's 6 pages of raw truth. Not bitterness, explaining who her grandfather truly was, what he had quietly done for her, father, and how that profound kindness had been callously twisted into leverage and lies. I told her that the money she would one day receive was not merely a gift, was a profound responsibility, a solemn reminder to choose authentic love over fleeting convenience, unwavering loyalty over superficial appearances, and genuine courage over compliant silence, because she was the only one left in our family who still had a chance to truly do it right. When I sealed that envelope, I felt like I had closed a painful chapter, not of grief, but of silence. The kind of insidious silence that creeps in when the people you love betray you slowly enough that you almost forget it's betrayal at all, until one day you find yourself standing alone at a funeral with no one truly by your side. And now, finally, I had ensured that that particular silence could not, be passed down through generations. The letter landed in Victor's mailbox for days after I left Mr. Harrison's office. Sent by certified mail with a delivery confirmation. Slip that pinged my inbox at precisely 11:13 a.m. And I imagined him standing in his kitchen, flipping through a stack of envelopes like it was any other Wednesday, until his eyes caught the law firm's familiar logo stamped conspicuously in the corner. And I knew the exact moment he opened it, because he didn't call, didn't text, didn't email, not that day, not even the next. But Amelia did. And not with coherent words, but with a rapid-fire string of text messages that ranged from passively aggressive wow, classy, Coraline, to openly hostile, you're unbelievable. Do you even care about Chloe? I didn't reply, because that profound silence was the most honest, most powerful thing I could possibly give them. When I finally picked up the phone on the third day, it was Victor calling from a blocked number. His voice was low, uncertain, almost soft. Like he thought perhaps if he adopted the tone he used when he was 6 and scared to admit he'd broken, something, I would melt into the mom he remembered from before this all turned to ash. He started with, "Mom, I just got the letter." As if I didn't already know. As if the last 72 hours hadn't been thick with the suffocating weight of his predictable reaction. I said nothing. I just let the silence speak for itself. And when he finally said, his voice a tremor, "Is this real?" I answered, my voice steady, "You tell me." Because there was nothing left for me to explain, and the pause that followed felt like the longest. 10 seconds of my entire life before he finally confessed, "I didn't know Dad felt that way." And I snapped. Not screamed, not raged, just snapped into pure ice. You didn't know because you never bothered to ask, Victor? You were too busy pretending we were optional. And that was when Amelia picked up on the other line, her voice sharp, demanding, laced with furious indignation. "You can't actually disinherit your own son. That's insane." And I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how utterly predictable she was. How quickly her mask of polite concern dropped when the money supply dried up. And I said, I didn't disinherit him. I protected Chloe. And Amelia scoffed, a sneering sound from us, as if she couldn't even conceive of herself as a threat. And I answered from this moment, this conversation, this blatant entitlement. And before she could spit out whatever venom she had next, I hung up, because that was the boundary. Now, you don't get to choose neglect and then demand access. You don't get to opt out of grief and then brazenly claim an inheritance. You don't get to erase the funeral and then rewrite the will. I sat at the kitchen table afterward in the same spot where Arthur's heart had given out, staring at the quiet that followed. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt something close to stillness. Not happiness, not closure, but a profound sense of control. Like I had finally done the difficult thing Arthur couldn't bring himself to do before it was too late. Later that night, I received one more text from Victor. Simply read, "I don't know how we come back from this." And I didn't reply because the answer wasn't mine to give anymore. It was Chloe's. And one day when she was old enough to truly understand everything, she would decide who earned a place in her future. And that, I realized, was the enduring legacy I was leaving behind. They showed up on a Sunday afternoon without warning. Amelia stepped out of the car in heels far too high for a driveway confrontation. And Victor trailed behind her, looking uncertain, as if he couldn't decide whether he was there to support her or to contain her. The second I opened the front door, she launched into it not with a greeting. Not with a question, but with a sharp, practiced accusation, as if she'd rehearsed it endlessly in the mirror. "You're manipulating this family through legal threats," she declared, her voice shrill. I stood unmoving in the doorway, neither inviting them in nor budging an inch, simply letting the full weight of her words crash against the silence between us. Then she added, with a self-righteous indignation, "You're punishing us for setting boundaries." And that was when I saw it, the smug tilt of her head, the unshakable belief that she somehow still occupied the moral high ground. Even after skipping Arthur's funeral, even after siphoning money through Victor, even after attempting to play the victim in a story she had authored with her own deceitful hands, I said nothing. Just stepped aside enough for them to enter, primarily because I knew Chloe was upstairs in the hallway, half listening, as all children do, and something deep within me needed her to witness this. Not to hurt her, but to protect her, to equip her with truth as an unbreakable armor. Amelia strutted into the living room, her perfume heavy, her words even heavier. While Victor quietly sat down, his eyes fixed on the floor, allowing her to take the lead, as she always did. "We talked to a lawyer," she announced, arms crossed. "And if this will isn't revised, we may have grounds to question your capacity." And that's when I finally spoke, my voice calm and low. "Are you threatening to declare me mentally unfit?" Amelia shrugged a dismissive gesture. "I'm just saying it's not unheard of. Grief does strange things to people." And I saw Victor flinch at that. Whether from guilt or shame, I couldn't tell. Then I heard the faint creak of the hallway floor. Upstairs, Chloe shifting her weight, listening intently. And I knew that every word being spoken was being absorbed by the only person in this family who still had a chance to see clearly. I turned to Victor and asked, "Do you agree with her, eh?" And he didn't answer, just swallowed hard and looked away. That silence was louder than anything Amelia had said because it confirmed what I needed to know. He wouldn't stop her. He wouldn't stand up to her. He wouldn't defend his mother or his father's sacred memory, not when it meant risking conflict. In his own comfortable home, Amelia seized that silence as fuel, stepping closer, her voice laced with accusation. "You're tearing this family apart over money." And I laughed. It's not a loud, mocking laugh, just a single, dry, hollow sound. The kind you let out when something is so profoundly absurd it crosses into pure tragedy. "I'm tearing it apart," I echoed. "Arthur died alone. His own son didn't show up. And you're worried about the inheritance?" And that was when I saw Chloe step into the hallway, halfway down the stairs. Her eyes wide but steady, her small frame radiating an unexpected strength. Amelia turned, startled, her expression faltering for the first time. But Chloe didn't say a word. She simply looked at her father, then at me, then slowly walked back upstairs. The immense weight of that silent moment hanging in the room like a storm cloud waiting to break. Amelia, now visibly shaken, whispered, "She doesn't understand." And I replied, my voice firm, "She understands more than you think." Then I opened the front door, held it wide, and said, "We're done here." Victor stood without protest, walking out ahead of Amelia, who hesitated for a second, as if she might utter something else. But instead, she followed, her heels clacking against the tile. And I shut the door behind them just before her last step hit the porch. It was 3 weeks after that chilling confrontation when I found it. Small black flash drive, tucked inside an unassuming envelope placed discreetly in my mailbox. Number? Note. No label, just my name written in Chloe's careful 12-year-old handwriting. And my heart dropped, because I knew instantly it wasn't something playful or innocent. This wasn't a child's drawing or a digital birthday card. This was something serious, something secret. And when I plugged it into my laptop, I sat in stunned silence as folders opened themselves to me like tiny windows into a hidden world I had never been allowed to see. Each one meticulously named by date, each filled with files that made my stomach twist with a sickening dread. Recordings of phone calls, screenshots of text messages, even a few shaky videos filmed from behind her bedroom door. Clear enough to catch every damning word Amelia and Victor had thought were safely tucked behind closed conversations. In one recording, Amelia was yelling, her voice sharp and rapid. She's manipulating everyone with that will. And if Chloe sides with her, I swear to God, Victor will pull her out of that school and homeschool her until she gets her head on straight. And in another, Victor's voice was quieter, but somehow far worse. Just let Mom run her game. It's not like we were counting on the money right now anyway. And if Chloe plays nice, she can still help us later. I sat there, frozen, listening to my own son talk about my estate as if it were a strategy board. As if I were some dying pawn instead of his living, breathing mother. But the most agonizing part came in a video labeled Kitchen Night, where Amelia, standing by the sink, whispered conspiratorially into her phone, "If we push just a little harder, she'll crack. We'll say she's confused. Maybe get the lawyer to question her state of mind." And then, boom, the trust gets flagged. And I could hear Chloe's breath catch just as the video abruptly cut off. And I don't know what broke me more. Amelia's audacious cruelty, or the horrifying realization that my granddaughter had been actively protecting while I was so blindly trying to protect her. Buried at the very bottom of the folders was a text. Document just a few lines long, but it read like a physical gut punch. "Grandma," it began in Chloe's simple, earnest script. I didn't know who else to tell. "I hear things when they think I'm asleep. I know they're lying. I believe you. I'm saving this in case you ever need help." I stared at those words for a long, long time, longer than anything I'd read since Arthur's unsent letter. And I knew in that moment that the legacy I thought I was leaving wasn't just about money or trust clauses or even revenge. It was about her, about Chloe, standing alone in a house where truth was treated like poison, meticulously recording evidence to protect the only adult in her life who hadn't failed her yet. I backed up the drive twice. One copy for Mr. Harrison, one locked securely in my safe. And I wrote a new letter to Chloe, sealed and dated to be opened if anything ever happened to me before she turned 18. Because I needed her to know that not only did I believe her, I implicitly trusted her, and that if she ever needed to stand in front of a judge, a school counselor, or anyone else who dared to question her sanity, she would have irrefutable proof that she saw it all and never looked away. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat in Arthur's armchair, holding that tiny flash drive in my palm like it was both a grenade and a precious gift, all at once. And I made a vow not just to protect Chloe's inheritance, but to fiercely protect her voice, because in this family, who's the first one brave enough to truly use it? The mediation took place in a neutral office downtown, a bland, beige room, with politely uncomfortable furniture and bottled water on a glass table. The kind of place meticulously designed to feel non-threatening while everyone inside silently prepared for war. When Victor and Amelia walked in, Amelia dressed as if auditioning for a courtroom drama, and Victor looking 10 years older than he had a month ago. I didn't greet them, didn't offer a single smile. I simply sat with Mr. Harrison at my side. The folder containing Chloe's flash drive, the bank transfers, Arthur's unsent letter. and the transcript of Victor's recorded visit stacked neatly in front of me like a quiet, irrefutable threat wrapped in paper. The mediator, a woman with a calm, neutral tone, introduced herself and began by asking why we were all there. Amelia immediately launched into her pre-rehearsed narrative, painting me as grief-stricken and vengeful, suggesting my decisions were driven by emotional instability and potential cognitive decline. I watched her perform her victimhood, like a script she'd memorized, while Victor sat beside her, silent, face drawn, his eyes darting away every time I looked at him. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice, didn't tremble. I simply passed the folder across the table and said, "This is why?" And I watched the mediator flip through page after page of meticulous documentation, dates, transactions, handwritten notes, the audio file list, and finally Chloe's flash drive with a simple printed label, evidence. And I knew the moment. The room shifted the exact second the overwhelming weight of truth shattered the flimsy illusion Amelia had been spinning. The mediator paused, looked up, and asked Amelia directly, "Were you aware that your daughter recorded statements about attempting to alter a legal trust through manipulation?" Amelia's face drained of color as she sputtered, "She's 12. She doesn't understand context." But it was too late. The words were out, the recordings existed, and the facade crumbled rapidly. The mediator turned to Victor and asked if he'd like to speak. He said nothing, just rubbed his hands together as if trying to erase fingerprints from his own guilt. And I said, my voice quiet, "She tried to warn you." That's when Amelia exploded, not with words of defense, but with pure, unfiltered rage, slamming her hand on the table and yelling, "This is all because you couldn't handle your husband dying. Now you're trying to punish us because you're lonely." The mediator calmly asked her to step outside for a moment to collect herself. Amelia stormed out, her heels echoing in the hallway, leaving Victor behind. And for the first time since Arthur's funeral, Victor finally spoke directly to me, his voice small, tired. "I didn't know it had gotten that bad." And I said, "You didn't want to know." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. "I just wanted peace." And I told him, "You don't get peace from silence. You get it from standing up when it matters." When the mediator returned, she informed us that there was no legal basis to challenge the trust. It was legally sound, morally justified, and based on overwhelming documentation. She also added that Chloe's statements held significant weight as evidence of undue pressure within the household. Amelia didn't come back in, not even to hear the official outcome. And Victor left shortly after, quietly, without a handshake, without a backward glance. I stayed behind for a moment, gathering my things, and felt the strangest sensation wash over me. Not triumph, not relief, but a kind of settled sorrow. It's the kind that comes when you realize the battle's truly over, not because you won, but because the undeniable truth finally made it impossible for anyone to keep pretending otherwise. Chloe turned 18 last Friday. The day arrived not with balloons or cake, but with a quiet knock on my door just after noon. Her eyes, wide but steady, met mine as she stepped inside and handed me the letter I'd written her 5 years ago. Still unopened, still sealed. "I wanted to read it with you," she whispered. I didn't say anything, just nodded and watched as she carefully opened the envelope as if it might break apart in her hands, slowly unfolding the 6 pages I had poured my soul into back when everything felt like it was utterly collapsing. She read silently for several minutes, her face shifting from intense focus to tears, pausing only once to ask, "Is all of this still true?" And I said every single word. And she hugged me tighter than she ever had before, whispering, "Thank you for telling me the truth when no one else would." And I felt every ounce of pain and purpose converge within that single profound embrace. Afterward, we sat down in Arthur's old armchair together. She pulled out her phone and showed me a short video. It was her, standing in front of a judge at a legal name change hearing, saying clearly, her voice strong and unwavering, "I'd like to change my middle name to Coraline after my grandmother." And I couldn't stop the tears then. I couldn't hold back the way my chest cracked open at the sound of her reclaiming her identity, choosing a part of this family that didn't hurt her, didn't lie to her, didn't treat her like leverage. As she crossed the stage and they called out her full new name, Chloe Coraline Whitfield, she looked directly at me and smiled, a radiant, knowing smile. And I saw in her face not just pride, but a profound clarity, the kind Arthur used to, where when he made hard decisions that no one else understood until it was far too late. Victor was there too, sitting alone in the back row, his eyes red-rimmed, his suit wrinkled, clapping out of obligation more than joy. He didn't approach me. He didn't approach Chloe either. Not because he wasn't allowed, but because I think he finally understood what it meant to be truly cut off, in ways deeper than a mere bank account. After the ceremony, Chloe ran to me first, hugged me again, and whispered, "They chose me to live with next semester." Her roommate backed out, Kay, and I laughed through my tears, knowing I'd get another year of her stories. Her music playing softly in the background, her toothbrush in my bathroom, a quiet victory against everything Amelia had tried to script. We never mentioned Amelia that day, not once, because by then she had truly faded into the background, like a subplot that had utterly lost its relevance. Her silence, her continued absence, was more telling than any apology she never gave. When I tucked Chloe in that night, in her old childhood room, I left the door cracked open just like I used to. And she said, her voice soft with gratitude, "You gave me a life I didn't even know I needed." And I kissed her forehead and said, "You chose it, sweetheart. I just cleared the path." And as I walked down the hallway back to my own room, past Arthur's photo on the wall, I touched the frame and whispered softly, "She's going to be okay, love. We're going to be okay." And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. True family stands by you in your darkest hours. When they don't, and instead choose self-interest and deception, it's a painful but necessary realization that boundaries must be drawn. Protecting your peace and your legacy means having the courage to act, even when it means making incredibly difficult decisions about those you once loved unconditionally. The truth, when revealed, has a powerful way of setting things right, even if it leaves behind a quiet sorrow.